The rhythmic hum, a soft, almost imperceptible thrum against the backdrop of an otherwise quiet suburban afternoon, was the only sound Alex Mercer truly cared about. It emanated from his front yard, a place that, to the casual observer, might have looked like a futuristic art installation or perhaps even an elaborate playground structure. But to Alex, it was life, rows upon rows of gleaming PVC pipes, meticulously aligned, formed vertical towers stretching almost 8 feet high, each tube cradling dozens of vibrant green leaves, ruby red lettuce, crisp butterhead, aromatic, basil, and plump, ripe strawberries. Water, enriched with precisely measured nutrients, trickled silently through the closed-loop system, illuminated by the gentle glow of LED grow lights that cast an ethereal, alien-like luminescence, especially as dusk began to fall. This wasn't just a garden. It was the Green Spire, Alex's personal declaration of independence from traditional agriculture, a testament to efficiency, sustainability, and his unwavering belief that food should be grown where people lived. He often joked that his carbon footprint was smaller than a pixie's, and he took immense pride in the fact that his family hadn't bought a single piece of produce from a grocery store in over a year. The air around the farm, even on the hottest days, carried a fresh, verdant scent, a stark contrast to the perfectly manicured, yet utterly lifeless, expanses of monoculture grass that defined the rest of the Willow Creek Estates neighborhood. Alex, a software engineer by trade, approached hydroponics with the same meticulous logic and innovative spirit he applied to coding, constantly optimizing, monitoring, and expanding his system. He'd spent countless hours designing the optimal flow, the perfect nutrient balance, and the most energy-efficient lighting, all powered by the discrete solar panels integrated into his roof. His backyard was a more traditional, albeit still productive, space, but the front yard was his statement piece, his living sculpture, a vibrant, vertical garden that hummed with life, yet undeniably looked unconventional from the street, a stark departure from the uniform landscaping dictated by the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. He knew it pushed the boundaries, but he'd meticulously read the bylaws, finding no explicit prohibition against vertical farming structures or food production systems, only vague language about maintaining aesthetic harmony and standard landscaping practices. He believed his Green Spire was harmonious in its own high-tech, green way. The peace of his afternoon, a moment of quiet satisfaction as he adjusted a nutrient drip, was shattered not by a sound, but by a sight. A stark white envelope, tucked precisely under the stone frog statue by his mailbox, stood out like a beacon of unwelcome formality. It bore the return address of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, the dreaded acronym HOA embossed, in an austere, unyielding font. Alex's stomach tightened. He'd been expecting it, in a way. Whispers had reached him, oblique comments from neighbors about that strange garden and the rules, but expectation didn't lessen the sting. His fingers trembled slightly as he tore open the seal, revealing a single sheet of paper, perfectly centered text, devoid of any warmth. It was a formal notice of non-compliance. The language was clipped, legalistic, and utterly impersonal. "Dear resident," it began, "despite them knowing his name perfectly well, it has come to the attention of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association Board of Directors that the landscaping at your property, 1422 Sycamore Lane, is in direct violation of Article 4, Section B, Subsection 3 of the Willow Creek Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions CC and RS regarding standard landscape requirements and aesthetic harmony, specifically, the presence of an unauthorized, non-traditional cultivation system, which detracts from the uniform appearance of the community, is deemed a violation. You are hereby requested to bring your property into compliance within 30 days by removing the aforementioned structure and replacing it with approved landscaping materials, as outlined in the Willow Creek Design Guidelines. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and potential legal action. Alex read it twice, his initial trepidation hardening into a quiet, simmering anger. Unauthorized, non-traditional cultivation system. He looked around at his thriving, living masterpiece, then at the neatly trimmed, chemical green lawns of his neighbors. His garden was cleaner, greener, and more productive than any of them. This wasn't about aesthetics, it was about control. It was about defining standard in a way that stifled innovation and personal choice. The hum of the Green Spire suddenly sounded less peaceful and more like a challenge, a declaration. He wouldn't just remove it, he couldn't. This farm was more than just plants, it was a principle, and he knew, with a fierce certainty, that this was just the beginning. The initial notice from the Willow Creek Estates HOA was just the first shot fired in what quickly escalated into a full-blown war. Alex's 30-day compliance window dwindled rapidly, not because he was taking action to dismantle the Green Spire, but because he was meticulously building his defense. He immersed himself in the labyrinthine world of property law, specifically, scrutinizing HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions CC and RS across various states, searching for precedents, loopholes, anything that could support his cause. His living room floor became a sea of legal documents, highlighted clauses, and scribbled notes. He even reached out to a pro bono environmental lawyer he found through an online forum, a feisty woman named Brenda Chavez, who specialized in community disputes and shared Alex's passion for sustainable living. Brenda's initial advice was clear: documentation was key. Take photos, record conversations, and keep every single piece of correspondence. This was a paper trail battle, as much as it was a principal one. Just as the 30-day deadline loomed, a second, far more aggressive letter arrived. This one wasn't merely a notice of noncompliance. It was a final demand for compliance and notice of intent to impose fines. The language was colder, sharper, the words immediate legal action and lien on property stark threats. The fine proposed was steep, $500 per week until the Green Spire was removed, retroactive to the date of the first notice. Alex felt a cold dread, quickly replaced by a hot wave of indignation. This wasn't about aesthetic harmony. This was about financial coercion. He knew Brenda was right. They weren't just asking him to remove his farm, they were daring him to fight. And fight he would. He fired off a certified letter in response, drafted with Brenda's careful guidance, citing various sections of their own CC and RS that vaguely defined standard landscaping and firmly, but politely disputing their interpretation, reserving all his rights. The real confrontation came at the next monthly HOA board meeting. The community clubhouse, usually half empty for these mundane gatherings, was packed. News of the hydroponic house had clearly spread like wildfire through the neighborhood's grapevine. As Alex walked in, a ripple of whispers followed him. He could feel eyes on him, curious, disapproving, and surprisingly, a few that seemed sympathetic. The meeting itself was a tightly controlled affair, run by Mrs. Albright, the HOA president. Mrs. Albright was a woman whose perfectly coiffed silver hair and impeccably tailored blazers seemed to embody the very standard the HOA sought to uphold. Her voice, when she spoke, was crisp and unyielding, like freshly starched linen. "We will now address the matter of 1420 Sycamore Lane," she announced, her gaze locking onto Alex with an almost surgical precision. Alex felt a surge of isolation in that room. He was the anomaly, the disruptor in their carefully ordered world. He presented his case calmly, explaining the environmental benefits of the Green Spire, the lack of weeds or pests, the minimal water usage compared to traditional lawns. He even brought a small, vibrant basil plant from his farm, offering it to Mrs. Albright as a peace offering. She stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. The discussion that followed was less a discussion and more a series of thinly veiled accusations and complaints from other residents. Mr. Henderson, from 2 streets over, a man known for his perfectly striped lawn, grumbled loudly about property values and setting a precedent. If we let him have a farm, what's next? Chickens, goats. This is Willow Creek, not some commune. He boomed, to scattered murmurs of agreement. But then, a soft voice from the back spoke up. It was Sarah Chen, a young mother who lived across the street. Actually, she began, her voice a little shaky, but gaining strength. Alex shared some of his strawberries with my kids last week. They were amazing, and his system uses hardly any water. It feels innovative. Is it really worse than someone letting their lawn turn brown in a drought? Her comment sparked a small buzz, a few nods, and Mrs. Albright shot her a steely glare. A few more residents joined the fray, some echoing Mr. Henderson's concerns about aesthetics and rules being rules, while others, quieter ones, expressed curiosity or even admiration for Alex's ingenuity. One elderly woman, Eleanor Vance, who lived next door to Alex and often watched him tend his farm, spoke simply, "It's certainly unique, but it's always neat. And the vegetables are beautiful. Makes a lot more sense than cutting grass every week." Her words, simple and direct, carried a surprising weight. Despite this small flicker of support, the board, led by Mrs. Albright, remained unswayed. They reiterated their demand for compliance, citing the subjective aesthetic harmony clause, and officially voted to impose the weekly fines. Alex left the meeting feeling a mix of profound frustration and a steel-like resolve. He was no longer just protecting his farm. He was fighting for the right to innovate, for common sense, and against the arbitrary power of rigid rules. He pulled out his phone, calling Brenda Chavez. "They imposed the fines," he stated, his voice tight. "Good." Brenda's voice came back, sharp and clear. "Now we have something tangible to fight. This isn't just about your yard anymore, Alex. This is about their overreach. Are you ready for a longer fight?" Alex looked back at his house, where the gentle hum of the Green Spire continued its quiet operation, bathed in the twilight glow of its LED lights. "Ready," he affirmed, the word feeling less like a declaration and more like a promise to himself. He knew this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The imposition of weekly fines only hardened Alex's resolve, transforming his personal gardening venture into a full-blown public crusade. His initial phone call to Brenda Chavez, the environmental lawyer, quickly blossomed into a committed legal partnership. Brenda, true to her reputation, was a whirlwind of strategic thinking and relentless action. She immediately drafted a robust counter-response to the HOA's demand, not just disputing the fines, but questioning the very legality of the aesthetic harmony clause as it applied to innovative, sustainable practices. She argued that denying such a system was discriminatory against environmental progress and infringed upon Alex's property rights. Their legal exchanges became a thick binder of formal letters, cease and desist warnings, and motions, each piece of paper adding fuel to the fire. It wasn't long before the local news caught wind of the escalating dispute. A segment on Channel 7 News, titled Hydroponic Hustle or HOA Hassle, aired during the evening broadcast. The report featured footage of the Green Spire bathed in its otherworldly LED glow, contrasting sharply with the perfectly manicured, yet sterile, lawns surrounding it. Alex was interviewed, articulating his passion for self-sufficiency and the absurdity of the HOA's stance. "I'm not asking for special treatment," he stated, looking directly into the camera, his voice calm but firm. I'm just asking for the freedom to innovate, to grow food sustainably on my own property, without infringing on anyone else's rights. What's wrong with fresh, healthy food in our own community?" The report also included a terse, pre-recorded statement from Mrs. Albright, the HOA president, emphasizing the importance of upholding community standards and avoiding slippery slopes. The segment, though brief, ignited a small firestorm on local social media groups. Comments flooded in, polarized between those who championed Alex's innovation and those who staunchly defended the HOA's authority. Typical HOA tyranny. One post read, garnering dozens of likes. Another countered, Rules are rules. He bought into the community. Amidst this growing public debate, the Green Spire itself began to experience an unexpected boom. Perhaps it was the increased publicity, or maybe just the continuous refinement of Alex's system, but the yield exploded. Tomatoes grew larger, lettuce leaves lusher, and the strawberries, already abundant, seemed to double in size. Alex found himself with an overflowing bounty, far more than his family could consume. He started leaving baskets of fresh produce on his porch with a free for neighbors sign, expecting only a few takers. To his surprise, the baskets would be empty within hours, often accompanied by thank you notes or even small gifts left by anonymous hands. This quiet act of sharing subtly began to shift opinions in his favor. However, not all was smooth sailing for the farm. A new, more insidious challenge emerged: algae. A persistent, dark green film began to coat the inside of some pipes, threatening to clog the nutrient flow and starve the plants. It was a technical setback Alex hadn't fully anticipated, demanding late nights of troubleshooting, draining, and cleaning the system. It was tedious, frustrating work, momentarily making him question if the constant battle was worth it. It was during one of these late-night cleaning sessions that he encountered Marcus Thorne, a new resident who had just moved in 2 houses down. Marcus, a burly man with kind eyes and calloused hands, introduced himself while watering his own, perfectly conventional, front lawn. "Evening, Alex," he said, nodding towards the Green Spire. "Looks like you're having some trouble there." Alex sighed, explaining the algae issue. Marcus listened intently, then surprised Alex by offering, "You know, I used to run a fish farm. Down south, we dealt with algae all the time. Ever considered adding a UV sterilizer to your water tank? Kills the algae without harming the plants." Alex was taken aback. He'd researched UV sterilization, but dismissed it as overkill. Marcus, however, explained it in practical, farm-sense terms that resonated with Alex's engineering mind. "I even have a spare one in my garage from an old project. Might be overkill for your setup, but you're welcome to borrow it. See if it works." Marcus quickly became an invaluable, unexpected ally. He didn't just lend the equipment, he offered practical advice on nutrient management, water testing, and even helped Alex install the UV sterilizer, which, within days, began to effectively combat the algae, turning a significant setback into a manageable challenge. Meanwhile, the HOA, seemingly emboldened by their public stance and ignoring the growing undercurrent of support for Alex, continued their relentless pursuit. Brenda discovered they had quietly amended their bylaws just a year prior, tightening definitions of landscaping and explicitly prohibiting non-decorative structures without prior board approval, a clause that seemed custom-tailored to target Alex's farm. This felt less like maintaining standards and more like a deliberate attempt to enforce a narrow vision, perhaps even to quash anything that deviated from the established norm. Brenda also uncovered rumors of a new, large-scale landscaping contract the HOA was negotiating, a multi-year deal that would standardize the entire community's aesthetic down to the type of shrubs. There was a subtle, unspoken implication that the Green Spire was a messy variable in this grand, profitable plan. The battle was no longer just about Alex's yard. It was about the HOA's increasing power, their financial interests, and their determination to exert absolute control over the definition of community harmony. Alex knew this fight had far deeper roots than just his hydroponic tomatoes. The conflict reached a fever pitch, culminating in a specially convened town hall meeting that felt less like a community gathering and more like a public tribunal. The HOA, reeling from the negative press generated by the Channel 7 expose and the burgeoning social media buzz, had reluctantly agreed to hold an open forum, a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. Mrs. Albright, her usual rigid composure visibly strained, presided over the meeting with an air of brittle authority. She and the other board members reiterated their stance, emphasizing the sanctity of the CC&RS, property values, and the need for order. However, their words seemed to ring hollow against the backdrop of Alex's now thriving Green Spire and the unexpected surge of community support. Alex, flanked by a quietly confident Brenda Chavez, presented his case again, but this time, he didn't just speak about sustainability or personal rights. He spoke about community. He revealed how the surplus produce from the Green Spire was being donated to the local food bank, how he had started a small, free workshop on basic hydroponics for interested neighbors, and how the farm was attracting beneficial insects, reducing the need for chemical pesticides that often drifted into neighboring yards. He also unveiled a series of photos Marcus Thorne had helped him capture, showcasing the incredible biodiversity now flourishing around his yard: butterflies, hummingbirds, and even a family of finches, all drawn to the vibrant ecosystem of his vertical farm, a stark contrast to the sterile, pest-ridden monoculture lawns that surrounded them, demanding constant chemical intervention. The mood in the room began to perceptibly shift. Doubts flickered on faces that had initially seemed resolute in their support of the HOA. Mrs. Albright tried to cut him off, citing time limits, but the crowd, now emboldened, demanded he continue. It was at this critical juncture, just as Mrs. Albright was about to call for a vote of confidence on the HOA's actions, that a small, reedy voice cut through the tension. Lily Henderson, Mr. Henderson's shy 9-year-old daughter, stood up in the front row, clutching a tablet. Her father, initially horrified, tried to pull her down, but Lily, surprisingly resolute, spoke into the microphone offered by a sympathetic neighbor. "My dad says rules are rules," she began, her voice gaining confidence, "but Mr. Alex's plants are yummy. And he showed me how to grow a tomato on his app, and it's cool. And my hamster, Sprinkles, loves the basil. He gets all wiggly." She then held up her tablet, which projected a video onto the large screen behind the HOA board. It was a short, amateur video, clearly filmed by a child, showing Lily carefully tending a tiny hydroponic basil plant on her windowsill, excitedly narrating her farming adventures, and featuring Sprinkles the hamster nibbling on a fresh basil leaf from the Green Spire. The video concluded with Lily, looking earnestly into the camera, saying, "Why can't everyone have a little farm like Mr. Alex's? It's good for the planet and for hamsters." The entire room erupted, laughter mixed with applause, and even a few stern-faced HOA members cracked smiles. The innocence and undeniable charm of the video, coupled with the surprising fact that Mr. Henderson's own daughter was a silent supporter, completely disarmed the room. The video, secretly recorded and shared with Alex by a sympathetic teen neighbor who had been following the social media discussions, immediately went viral across the local community groups, reaching even wider audiences. It was the human element, the pure, unadulterated perspective of a child, that broke through the legal jargon and the rigid arguments. Mrs. Albright visibly faltered, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the unexpected public display of affection for the Green Spire. The usual HOA procedure was thrown into disarray. Members of the board began whispering amongst themselves, a deep fissure appearing in their united front. Mr. Davies, the HOA treasurer, a usually stoic man, was seen shaking his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. Brenda Chavez seized the moment, stepping forward. Given the overwhelming public sentiment and the undeniable environmental and community benefits of Mr. Mercer's farm, she announced, her voice resonating through the room, "We propose an immediate cessation of all fines and the establishment of a special committee to review the existing CC&RS, not to remove the Green Spire, but to incorporate provisions for sustainable, innovative landscaping practices." The turning point was palpable. The HOA board, caught off guard by the public backlash and the compelling, innocent plea, found themselves scrambling. Mrs. Albright tried to regain control, but her authority had been irrevocably undermined. The meeting ended not with a clear resolution, but with a concession from the HOA, they would put the matter to a community-wide vote at the next General Assembly, not just on the fines, but on a proposed amendment to the CC and RS that would explicitly allow vertical gardens like Alex's, provided they met certain aesthetic and safety standards. As Alex left the clubhouse, a triumphant but exhausted smile on his face, he realized this was no longer just about his garden. It was about defining what community harmony truly meant in a changing world. And thanks to a brave little girl and a hamster, he finally had the momentum he needed. The decisive community-wide vote was held 2 weeks later, and the air in the Willow Creek Estates clubhouse was thick with anticipation. Alex, with Brenda and Marcus by his side, watched as the ballots were tallied. The results, when finally announced by a visibly subdued Mrs. Albright, sent a ripple of audible relief and quiet celebration through Alex's supporters. The motion to amend the CC and RS, explicitly allowing for sustainable, vertical gardening systems like the Green Spire, passed with a decisive 68% majority. Furthermore, a separate vote decreed that all fines previously levied against Alex Mercer were to be retroactively rescinded. It was a resounding victory, not just for Alex, but for the principle of innovation and the evolving definition of community harmony. Mrs. Albright, her face pale, but her voice still steady, accepted the outcome, though the defeat was clear in her eyes. The power she and her rigid board had wielded was fundamentally challenged, forcing a re-evaluation of their role within Willow Creek Estates. In the immediate aftermath, the shift was palpable. Neighbors who had previously given Alex polite but distant nods now approached him, genuinely curious about hydroponics, asking for advice, even offering to help him expand. Mr. Henderson, humbled by his daughter Lily's unexpected viral video, even approached Alex, offering a gruff apology, and asking for tips on starting a small herb garden for Lily and her hamster. The long-term impact on Willow Creek Estates was profound. Within months, inspired by the Green Spire and the newly amended bylaws, a handful of other residents began experimenting with their own smaller-scale vertical gardens, some integrating them seamlessly into their existing landscaping. The monotonous green of the neighborhood slowly began to acquire pockets of vibrant, edible color. The HOA, under new leadership, Mrs. Albright quietly retired from the board, citing personal reasons, shifted its focus. While still maintaining core standards, they began to embrace a more adaptive approach, establishing a community innovation committee to review new ideas that balanced aesthetic considerations with environmental sustainability and resident needs. They even approached Alex, not with demands, but with an offer to consult on drafting guidelines for future green initiatives. Recognizing his expertise, the Green Spire itself flourished, becoming a sort of unofficial community landmark. Alex continued to donate surplus produce to the food bank, but he also started a small, nonprofit Green Spire outreach program, hosting monthly workshops in his yard, teaching interested neighbors the basics of hydroponics, and inspiring a new generation of urban gardeners. He found a new passion in education and advocacy, speaking at local environmental conferences and consulting for other communities grappling with similar HOA challenges. Alex Mercer, once seen as the eccentric rebel of Willow Creek, had become an accidental local hero, a symbol of resilient innovation. His life had fundamentally changed. His software engineering career continued, but it was now balanced with a deeper, more fulfilling purpose rooted in his passion. He realized that the fight wasn't just about his farm. It was about the fundamental right to pursue better, more sustainable ways of living, even within the confines of established systems. He often looked out at the Green Spire, now a fully integrated, beloved part of the neighborhood landscape, its hum no longer a challenge, but a quiet testament to perseverance. He'd learned that true community harmony wasn't about rigid uniformity, but about embracing diversity, fostering innovation, and finding common ground, even if that common ground was rooted in a vertical garden. The loop of his story wasn't just about winning a battle, it was about transforming a community, proving that a single act of defiance, fueled by passion and principle, could sprout lasting change, leaving a vibrant, green legacy that transcended property lines and inspired a fresh perspective on what a neighborhood could truly be. The subtle glow of his LED lights at dusk now served as a beacon, a quiet invitation to imagine a greener, more innovative future, starting right there, in a suburban front yard.